Well, we'll go ahead and get started. This is uh, this is one of the ones I think I've been looking forward to for quite some time, and I guess probably gets to some of the scriptures that most people kind of associate this style of writing with Revelation when they think of it. Just this imagery and judgments, and there's so much going on. Um, but we're going to, as our title says here. We're going to be in Revelation chapter 6 and 7, so if you have your Bible and want to follow along. And we're also going to be some in Matthew 24. And really from here forward, we'll be in and out of Matthew 24, which are really the predominant words of Christ on the end times and that type of literature that we have. So we'll be there quite a bit. So that's actually where we're going to start. It's one verse in Matthew 24. I think it kind of summarizes everything we're going to talk about today, or at least the first portion of it. And so it's Matthew 24 and 8. Johnny, will you click on like that PowerPoint, just that window? There we go. Thank you. And so Matthew 24 and 8 says this. It says, all these are the beginning of sorrows. So this comes right at the end of a fairly familiar passage. And the reason we wanted to start here is that word sorrows translates literally into the pain of childbirth or birth pains. So it's a specific type of sorrows that Jesus is referencing here. And it comes at the end of what he says is describing the world preparing itself for the end. So what we're going to see is that Matthew 24 runs parallel to Revelation chapter 6. They're intertwined in the same order. And if really, I think Tim would agree with me, if you don't take anything else away from this study, how closely those two mirror each other is really what I've taken away. Just that they're intertwined completely.
Yeah, that was something I learned as we studied this. You know, I always thought that Matthew 24, the beginning of sorrows, happens before what you read in Revelation. But as we studied it and correlated this back and forth, I truly believe that these first seals in the beginning of sorrows in Matthew 24 are the same time period. Christ is just shrinking it down into a very understandable few sentences instead of a whole entire book. So that's kind of the way we set this up as we go along. You'll see us jumping back and forth between what Matthew 24 says and how what Jesus says is exactly what Revelation says. Two different time periods there that these two books are written in, but same exact thing.
So the bulk of what we'll read in Matthew 24 will actually be from the verses and scriptures that are preceding 24 and 8. So we're really going to look at verses 5, 6, and 7 as we go through Revelation 6. Yep. So if you remember, the last time we had kind of had our Bible study, we ended with this image of heaven, and there was a book that nobody was worthy to open except this slain lamb, who we know to be Christ. And that book was sealed with 7 seals, and that's kind of where it ends. In chapter 5 of Revelation. So Revelation 6 is starting with the opening of that book of those seals. So here's what it says. Revelation 6 and 1. It says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. So, the first seal is a lot that you can find out there about kind of conflicting viewpoints on what this is. And me and Tim I had multiple options wrote down. Tim had multiple options of what this first seal really is. We know obviously it says a white horse and the rider comes to conquer. But, you know, I think if you really look at this and tie it back to what Jesus said in Matthew 24, it becomes clear. This is the spirit of Antichrist. If you see, and just go back here and look, that white kind of looks like peace, right? That you think that's a peaceful thing. You even see later on in Revelation that Jesus, it talks about him coming on a white horse. But that's really not the purpose of this. It looks like peace, but of this spirit, it's to conquer and take over. So, anything you want to add before we go on to Matthew 24 and 5?
Just that's the basis for how we come up with who this writer is how Matthew 24 is structured and written. If you go back and read Matthew 24 in its order, it talks about the spirit of Antichrist first, which would be first seal. Seals commonly in the Bible are, and these riders and these horsemen, you can think of them as spirits, because that's essentially what we're looking at here is a spiritual realm and a sort of a representation of a spiritual realm. And notice the thing that stands out here to me the most is the mimicry of Christ.
Yep.
Rides the same colored horse, is bringing peace, and the Antichrist will, as we go on, we'll get into that later. For a certain period of time, the Antichrist will bring peace, but ultimately that's not true peace. And just notice how similar the great deception here, as Christ speaks about.
Yeah. And so this is not necessarily saying the Antichrist comes at this point. It's just that, like Tim said, that spirit of Antichrist. And if we look here in Matthew 24 and 5, Jesus kind of references that. It says this. It says, "For many shall come in my name." So it's not just one. There's many. And I think if you look, I think it's 1 John, he references. He said there'll be many false Christs, but there's one, that's coming. But it says, "For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." So there's that first parallel that we see from Matthew to Revelation 6. All right, so now we can go to the second seal. So back into Revelation, chapter 6, verse 3. It says this. It says, "And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, 'Come and see.' And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword." And so the second seal is war. Okay. So anything you want to...
Notice here, as we go through the seals, the first four seals are going to have horsemen, and then the remaining seals are not going to have horsemen. But notice how each one builds upon another. As the spirit of Antichrist comes, you're going to see sort of a removal of focus on God. You're going to see peace disappear after he brings a false peace. And all of these things will lead to conflict, turmoil, things that will then build upon the second seal being opened, which is war. And then you'll see when the third and fourth seals, there's even more building upon each seal that's opened. It's sort of like each seal leads the way to the next seal.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, the red horse, and then Matthew 24, the very next verse, like we said, these run in the exact same order. Matthew 24 and 6 says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." So wars and rumors of war. That's, everybody knows that verse. Whether you're a church or not, like wars and rumors of wars. Yep. It's just familiar. But Jesus is saying that's just something to look for as we keep getting closer.
Yep. And apply these. Look at the world around you and think about these things being in the world around you, and kind of start to, sort of put two and two together and think about where we could potentially be in this. And I feel like as Christians, it will shock us a little bit. And I feel that if you're an unbeliever, it should scare you a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I thought about just this week, and really it's today, when Jesus says wars and rumors of wars, and I think when you look at the next passage we're going to see here in seal 3, it's, some uncertainty. Just the rumor of war or a rumor of an attack can cause prices or something to skyrocket or plummet. And I think it's just so interesting. Rumor is not a word you think about in the Bible a lot. But Jesus says that, just the rumors of wars, the idea of war.
Well, you could even apply that to the stock market if you want to. That's how our whole entire stock market operates, is on essentially
rumor. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and go into that next seal. Revelation 6 and 5. It says, "And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, 'Come and see.' And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, 'A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine.'" So the third seal, famine, and then really just kind of uncertainty. It is the black horse. And I think Tim's going to add a little to that and talk about kind of how some of those things that it mentioned there converts into modern money.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I was telling Clifton, I sort of went down a rabbit hole here trying to look at what could these numbers actually represent and be. Thing to notice about the horsemen thus far is pay attention to the things that they have or do not have in their hands. The balances, of course, would represent commerce, a world market economy, things like that. So those are the things that are going to be upset by this particular horseman. The side note on the penny, where it talks about a penny. If you look back to the original Greek translation of what a penny is actually a denarius, which was a form of payment given to either an unskilled laborer for a day's work or to a soldier for a day's work. What I did was I looked at it 2 different ways. Because there's 2 different thoughts on what that amount of money actually is. The first way is it's actually a denarius, and what would a denarius represent in today's money if you converted it out? And that would be $43.50. So let's see, I did this study last week. So as of last week, the 2 measures of wheat and barley would be roughly for those sizes 26 and 28 cents. Well, in this environment, you're looking at $43.50, and then a little more than that for the barley. So drastic difference than what we see today. The other way in which most studies show this number being represented, the penny, is that it's just an average daily wage. So here in America, I took the average U.S. daily wage or hourly wage and converted it out over an 8-hour period, and that comes to $225.28 for these 2 sizes. So even though our prices are currently rising, I don't think we've got to the point that we're seeing this yet. Because I think when we get to this point, we're going to see famine, but we're not going to see famine necessarily because of scarcity. We're going to see famine because of expense. I think that's a thing that's going to play a role here. There's going to be scarcity, but I think that our prices are going to swing so far out of control that the average person is going to struggle to be able to feed themselves and their families.
Well, I think if you look just that first figure you give, and just to make the math a little easier, if you go 20-some cents and then $40,
yeah,
I mean that's 2,000% increase. I mean that's astronomical what that would do. That would just shut down everything.
I feel like that we're seeing in our markets today, we're seeing the beginnings of the destabilization that will cause this. I think it's actively going on right now, especially with the Russian-Ukrainian war, and they're blockading one day. They're currently not blockading, but that's likely to change in the next day or so. So you're seeing the prices of goods start to rise.
So, and then we can see this idea of famine in Matthew 24, in the very next verse, verse 7. And it even goes into some of the next seals that we'll talk about here in a little bit. It says, "For nation shall rise against nation," so that's kind of left over from the war, "and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." And we're not there yet, but when you get to pestilences and earthquakes, those are some of your next 2 seals in order. Yep. So we'll be back to this first. But right there it says there shall be famines. Now, if we go into the next seal, the 4th seal, Revelation 6 and 7, it says, "And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard a voice of the 4th beast say, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given to him and to them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beast of the earth." So I think really, one of the things I think of is this seal is almost just the culmination of everything that's happened before. It's war is killed, famine is killed, all these things, and it ends up in death, which is the fourth seal.
The first three add up to the fourth one, essentially.
Yeah. And so that pale horse is the way the King James Version of the Bible reads it. That word is actually, pale is a Greek word, chloros, which translates every other time it's in the Bible. I think it's in the Bible a total of 4 times. The only time it's translated as pale is here. It translates every other time as green. So just something to keep in mind. But one thing I thought, and I mean, you may have something about this. This is the only horse where the rider's named, and it's death and hell. And I thought, in modern times, a lot of times I think the church and Christians, they get a lot of blame. And I just, in my spirit, I kind of felt like the Lord showed me, as you come through those seals, the government or society is going to say, well, the church is to blame for all this. Mm-hmm. They're the reason we're at war. Religion's why we're at war. Religion's why our economy is bad. And the reality is, what he's showing us here is that it's death and hell. It's it's man's system and Satan. And that's what's been behind everything from the beginning.
Yeah, when you're going to see that Antichrist, the actual Antichrist is going to be the one saying the majority of this. Yep. He's going to be the one that is saying it's the church's fault. It's those followers of Christ. It's those people that believe in God.
Yep. And he doesn't reveal him true self till you're so far in
that you can't get out.
Yep. So anything else you want to add to this one before we move to the next seal?
Something interesting I thought about this particular horseman is he carries no weapon.
Yep.
Which is, and I don't know as to why that is, but it's interesting to me that Christ took the keys to death, hell, and the grave. So to me, it's almost like Christ has removed this particular horseman's weapon already, because he's conquered it already. There's nothing in the Bible that represents that. I like that. So.
Well, and I think kind of what it is Satan's left to almost use man to be their own downfall.
Yep.
All this is man-made creation, and it's just kind of, he's using us to destroy ourselves, really. And to see this, Matthew 24:9 says this. It says, "Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." And we'll come back to that here in just a bit as we go to the next seal, which is seal 5. So Revelation 6, I think we're going to read 9 through 11 here. It says, "And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, doest thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given to every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled." So the 5th seal is martyrs. And I think our understanding is the ones speaking there in heaven are the martyrs that are prior to the tribulation.
Yes.
Right? So
all these are the martyrs all throughout history and time,
yeah.
I think, prior to the start of the tribulation. Because we're going to see here in a little bit, there's another group of people that are separate from these.
Yep.
And they come from a different place. They're dressed very similarly. They have white robes as well.
Similar reward.
Different time. It's interesting to note, like we kind of see sort of as this seal is opened, it's sort of like there's a pause almost, because you got all these terrible things that are happening through the first 4 seals, and then this happens. And that's when there's no more horsemen after this.
Yep.
So it's kind of the 5th seal is kind of like this is what's going on in heaven. You're sort of looking in a different direction, I think.
And especially the next chapter.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and it almost, we talk, kind of points to why the earth experiences tribulation, is, God is telling them, you died a natural death on earth. Vengeance is mine, the Lord says. He's just. We know that. And so part of his judgments is revenge for these martyrs, for these people that have died throughout time. And something we were talking with last night as we were kind of preparing, I looked up some numbers just to see where we're at kind of in this, this time. What does martyrdom look like in, the 21st century? And in 2021, so last year, there were a little over 6,000 people killed for the cause of Christ. Now, you could think, out of 7 billion people, 6,000 may not seem like a lot. But that's a 60% jump just from the year 2020. So that's a huge, that's a significant statistically number that it rose just in 1 year. Lifeway, they're out of the Southern Baptist organization that has the bookstores and things. They did a study worldwide, and it said 1 in 7, or which that equates to 360 million Christians, say within the last year they've suffered significant persecution for being a Christian. And so martyrdom may not be death on our doorstep today, but it is for some people. And the persecution, if you look at that, 360 million, is definitely on the rise.
Yeah. It's interesting to me here that at the very end of that, it talks about until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So God has a number.
Yeah.
A certain number of people that are going to be martyred. And when that ticks off, that starts the remainder of this process.
Well, we'll see it in a couple of chapters, and I think it's in the book of Joel, the prophet Joel. It talks about a wine press, and it fills up, and when it fills up, God's judgment is released.
So once the wine press of wrath.
Yeah, of wrath. So once that blood of martyrs is filled, that triggers something in heaven, and that then will in turn trigger something here on earth. Yep. Let's move forward. Let me read Matthew 24, 9 and 10. This is when we just read that? Yeah. So it says this. It says, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. So it's not just killing here, Jesus says. Some's going to be killed, and some's just going to be hated. That's that persecuted part. Verse 10 says, and then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And I just thought, that strikes so much, so you can see us headed in that direction. Yep. And you really almost want to circle that and say, right here, we're right here.
Yeah.
But there's just so much going on. These are powerful scriptures. But then as we get into the sixth seal, Revelation 6 and 12, and we'll read on to the end of the chapter here. It says this. It says, and I beheld, and when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs. And when she is shaken of a mighty wind, and when the heaven departed as a scroll, and when it rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. It says, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So here we have that sixth seal. Earthquakes, eclipses, and just chaos. It's unescapable. Like I said, there's nowhere to hide from it. Nowhere on earth that's not going to be affected by it. Just cataclysm, really.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me there is where it talks about the sky being rolled back as a scroll. To me, the way I understand that is that actually happens. Something occurs to where that you can see actually what's up there. Mm-hmm. And that's what then leads all of these people. And if you notice, no man is left out, no woman is left out, no child is left out in that. It's rich, poor. It doesn't matter what nationality you are.
Yeah.
If you're here during that time, it's not a good time. And I think that's why the great fear comes on them that they wish that the rocks will fall on them, is because that's there, and they can see it. They can see the truth, essentially.
They know it's coming.
They know what's coming.
Yeah. And one of the things to talk about, and I think that's important, it talks about the sun not shining and the moon turning to blood. Those are eclipses of the sun, the earth, and the moon. I think probably for some, and it's probably definitely the minority now, but that's been taught that that's a literal event, that the sun's going to quit shining. And I think the way we both read it, these are occurrences in heaven that signal, in the sky, the heavens, not heaven where God is, but the heavens that signal the day of the Lord. So the solar eclipse, which would be what the Bible refers to, John saw as if the sun quit shining, is when the moon is between the earth and the sun. So the sun's light doesn't get here. It's dark. It'd be like a few years ago we had that in Kentucky, we remember. We had that path come through, and they call it the path of totality. And just where you was at, it would be like nighttime right in the middle of the day. And then the other, and we all hear of blood moon. Me and Tim were talking. It seems like those happen more and more now.
A lot more frequently.
You hear of them more. I know that. I think actually there's one just the next day or two. Is it Tuesday? Tuesday, election day.
And we just
Hopefully that ain't a sign. But that's when the earth passes between the sun and the moon, and so our shadow is on the moon, and it makes it appear red because the sunlight's not hitting it directly and bouncing back to us like normal. So anything else we need to add before we go on to the next chapter?
No, I don't think so. Just that if anybody remembers that eclipse where the sun was darkened, if you were outside and looking at that, that was the strangest feeling. And like I can remember, like you could hear animals, like they
behave differently.
Yeah, we live in the mountains, so like coyotes are a thing for us. They started howling. There was all
crickets start chirping.
Crickets,
frogs.
Yep, crickets. I remember the crickets.
Yeah.
So it'll be a strange time.
Yeah. And I've always thought maybe it's something when those two happen close together. I mean, maybe it's close together from where John was. I don't know where it's at. But some way those are going to play into it. So Matthew 24 and 29 and 30 will be the last time I think we're in Matthew tonight. And we'll definitely be back to it. But it kind of refers to similar circumstances and kind of gives us just some information. In verse 29 it says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens," what does that say? Cut it off up here.
Shall be shaken.
Shall be shaken. It says, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man." This is what Tim was talking about a moment ago. "The sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." So just phenomenal events, but they signify the end of that sixth seal. And I think really with that appearance, it kind of changes. It goes from chaos to something completely different, and we'll see here. Anything we need to add before we go on to the next one? Okay. So here's the six seals again before we move into chapter 17, just if anybody's noting. Spirit of Antichrist, war, famine, death, martyrs, and then just kind of natural chaos, whether it's weather or earthquakes or events in the sky. These are things that kind of mark as we see the day approaching, as Jesus said.
Yep.
So Revelation 7 and 1, getting to the back half of this. I think read verse, 3 verses or no?
1 through 3.
Yep. So it says this, "And after these things I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the four angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea." Verse 3 says, "Saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads." So that idea of sealing the servants of God really is the rest of this chapter.
Yep.
And what's important is you're going to see a transition from perspective of things happening on earth to at the same time what's going on in heaven. So it's really what we were talking about. It's almost the calm after the storm. Everything's been in chaos, and now God says, all right.
Still.
It's because if it kept going, the earth is just going to destroy itself. It's kind of was almost a crumbling on itself if you read there at the end of 6.
And here, even in the great day of wrath, right after that, as sort of, like you said, the world is being destroyed, you see mercy.
Mercy.
On God's chosen. And there's two groups of people that we're going to see here the first one's a specific number, and then the second one, if you're a Christian, you should be real happy about.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that stands out to me through these verses is that even in wrath, even in justified destruction, God is still taking care of His people.
Yeah. So, was there something you wanted to add of the meaning of wind, kind of in the Old Testament, that symbolism?
Yeah, wind a lot of time is tied to spirits. So there's some people believe that this can be interpreted as 4 spirits being held back and not being unleashed on the earth. So.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense because the seals were said to kind of represent spirits that were in the earth, you know. So it's maybe just really, like Tim said, some of the best, God's mercy. Yeah. So the next 4 verses here, or 5, is the 144,000. So starting in verse 4, it says this. It says, "And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Nephthalim were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zabulon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. And of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. So,
Be saying that in your sleep tonight.
yeah, so definitely 12,000 for all of them. Kind of John's a little long worded. I couldn't have just said all of them got 12,000. But anyways, we don't know, and we talked about this. Obviously, 12,000 of each tribe. And we don't know if that's an actual figure, right? There's some things, some scholars you read says 12 is just, what is it, symbolic. Of like completeness.
Yep.
But we just know something happens that it kind of points that a significant portion of the Jewish people realize Christ is the Messiah. Is that what you would say?
Yes, that's what I take here. This is, I'm not going to say it's the completion of God's promise to His chosen people, but this is a component of the completion of God's promise to His chosen people. All throughout the Bible, especially the Old Testament, where God Himself is dealing with the actual nation of Israel, regardless of how many times they turn away, regardless of how many terrible things they do, He never, ever gives up on them. No. And I think that extends all the way through into Revelation times. He still not gave up on them, and He's still fulfilling promises to them. Yeah, and with the numbers, anytime you see 3, 7, 12, typically, those are all completed numbers of God. And anytime you see multiples of those numbers, those are completed numbers of God. So 144,000 is a multiple. You know, you'll see here that we're going to see a set of seals, a set of trumpets, a set of vials, 777. So, you know, that's an ongoing theme. Anytime you see that, pay attention. That's a thing of God there.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's just something with the Jewish people. Like I said, there's no way for us really to know from this side of eternity if that's literal numbers or what that means. But it is of some significance to the Jewish people. And I think even was the last time or time before we talked about Ezekiel 38 and 39, Gog and Magog. You know, His protection's always on them. It never runs out. There wasn't, you know, when He spoke to Abraham and made that covenant, there wasn't an expiration on it. It wasn't until a certain time. It's forever. So into the next passage here, and this will finish us up in, or almost finish us up in chapter 7. It says, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude." And that's what Tim was saying. This should be our hope in as a Christian. "A great multitude which no man can number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood round about the throne, and about the elders, and the 4 beasts, and fell before the throne on their faces, and worshiped God, saying, Amen. blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in the white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, not the great tribulation, but came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. So I'm going to pause right there, because we're going to close with that last verse here in a second. But I think we're kind of in agreement that this could be a possible moment of the rapture from heaven's perspective.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I take this as well. It's mentioned some more on throughout the book of Revelation, but that's what this appears to be to me.
Yeah. We're going to add something here about the palm branches?
Yep, there's a lot of significance in what's worn in heaven and what's carried. White robes, of course, and the palm branches signify victory, triumph, peace, and eternal life. So, you'll be given a robe washed white with the blood of the Lamb. This is that robe. You're seeing it. It's on these people. So that's all massive significance there in the imagery.
Yep. So here's what we mentioned kind of when we were between chapters. Revelation 6, think of this as the unveiling of the seals from Earth's perspective. That's telling us what's happening on Earth during this time. I think Revelation 7 is kind of the same timeline, but what's happening in heaven, right? So I think that's understanding, he's giving us both sides of the coin. That's what they were revealing to John. But anything before we get ready to close?
Not that I... No, I think we have covered it.
All right, so I think verse 17, I've read this dozens of times, this passage. And for some reason this time it just stood out, so much to me. In verse 17, the end of chapter 7 here in Revelation, it says, For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne. So remember, that Lamb, it was bloodied. It was the only thing in heaven worthy to open those seals. But what's the Lamb doing in heaven? It says, In the midst of the throne, he shall feed them and shall lead them into fountains of waters. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And it just struck me, we think of in heaven just eternally worshiping, but this shows us Jesus is still serving us. I mean, and how powerful is that? In heaven, he's still serving. He's feeding, and that answers Brody's question, is there food in heaven? Jesus is feeding us. And he's still taking care of us even there. And I think that's so powerful to know. Even in eternity, he wants good things for us. And when, it says that he's working things to our good, that's forever and ever. And he's the only way we can get there is through Jesus. So I just thought that just struck me as powerful. Maybe it doesn't to you, but I hope so. That he's still there. And even though he's worthy to be on the throne, he's down serving. And to me, that was powerful. So we said there's 7 seals, and I know if you're keeping track in your mind, it only mentions 6. The 7th seal is not open the last time, and that really marks the next set of judgments and events to happen. So that's what we have for this one, I think.
Yeah.
Tim, anything?
Well, going back to Christ still serving in heaven, I think not the full summation, but you see a pretty good representation of Christ as Lamb and Shepherd.
Yep, everything.
He's everything.
Yep.
Both, in equal measure and unimaginable.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that pretty well finished what I had.
Yep, me too. So that finishes up. Thank everybody for listening.
Yep.